Tonight, we've got Margaret Dykeman over here in the corner. So she's going to be presenting on Arizona. So she's lived in Arizona for about 20 years. Longer, okay, sorry. 20 years or more. Basically, author, published in various magazines and other things, talking about backyard birding and lots of birds that we're not going to see around here, probably. Or if we do, they'll be on the Bird Alert. So lots of friendly birds in Arizona, lots of great pictures, all sorts of things like that. So Margaret, without further ado.
Well, thank you, Matt, for inviting me here, and Velma for edging me towards this part of the country again. And welcome to everybody who's on Zoom. So I'm hoping you can see me, but mainly see all the slides. So thank you again for everybody coming, and we'll get started. So you're here to see what you've come for. So just a little background on me. I grew up in Cicero, went to school at NIU, and then my husband went to school in Tulsa, and we ended up in Phoenix, Arizona. And when I got to Phoenix, Arizona, I realized, because I had been a birder in here, one of my first bird badge when I was a Girl Scout was a bird badge. So my first Girl Scout badge was a bird badge. So I've been a bird watcher since day one, and my spark bird, and you know what that is, that's the bird that really gets you into birding, was a blue jay. So when we ended up in Arizona, we have a place in Scottsdale. So I've been there since actually 1975. And about 20 years ago, we were fortunate to get a second home, and it's in northern Arizona. So it's just about 20 miles south of Flagstaff. So I'm very fortunate in that we have tons of birds from the Sonoran Desert in the southern part. And by southern Arizona, I'm going to talk about Phoenix, mainly the central area, because you could go down into Tucson and Patagonia, and that's a whole nother presentation. And if you'd like me to talk about that, invite me back next year. But what I'm really talking about is if you are coming to Arizona, and a lot of people do, you have family, there's a lot of people from Chicago who have moved to Arizona. You're probably coming to Phoenix, and you might want to go see the Grand Canyon and drive through Flagstaff, for example. So I'm going to talk about the birds that you can typically easily see if you're visiting family or relatives or just staying at a resort and going to do a little sightseeing. So there's a big difference between the two areas. Flagstaff is in Coconino County, and you can see it's way high up in the mountains. It's like almost 7,000 feet up. So there's a lot of ponderosa pine and oak and some chaparral. And we get up in Flagstaff 81 inches of snow, sometimes more snow than Anchorage, Alaska, although not recently. And it's a very large county. It's 18,861 square miles. Phoenix, there's only 15 counties in all of Arizona, unlike Illinois, which has a lot of them. So then Phoenix is in Maricopa County, and the elevation is basically desert, so it's 1,100 feet up. We're lucky if we get 7 inches of rain every year. And again, the bird diversity is very different. So I'm going to talk about that. Another very large county, Maricopa County, is the second largest county in the United States. Contrast that to DuPage County. You have 336 square miles in DuPage. You have 327 species that have found in DuPage County. So basically, you almost have one different species for every square mile in DuPage County. I bet you might not have known that. So what are the birds? As I mentioned, I'm going to concentrate on the ones you pretty easily can find. And if I didn't, we'd be in this situation, because I could get up here and talk for 2 or 3 or 4 hours about birds, and I know you don't want me to do that. So I'm going to concentrate on those most likely ones you're going to see. And I told you my spark bird was a blue jay. So now we're going to talk about all the birds that I'm going to talk about. And there's about 45 or 50 of them. This is a stellar jay. And as you can see, the background of this slide is green. So when the slide background is green, if I don't express it, it's found in northern Arizona. When the background of the slide is orange, it's found pretty much in the desert area. So the stellar jay was one of the first birds that I saw when I'm driving up to Flagstaff and I stop at a rest stop. And here comes this beautiful blue bird. And the name eventually will change, right? It's not going to be stellars in the future. We're going to name it something else because the people to be, or the people higher ups are, as you probably know, are changing birds' names after people, which are called eponyms, to bird names that describe the bird, not the person. So the Stellar's jay will eventually change, but it's one of the iconic birds in northern Arizona. It's very much jay behavior, stays high up in the ponderosa pines, will come to your bird feeders if you have peanuts, etc. But it's a bird you are very likely to see. Whoops, wrong way. And then another bluebird that we have is a woodhouse scrub jay. This was a taxonomic split from the western scrub jay. This bird is known as a model subject for studies for foraging and cognitive studies because this is part of the corvid family, and these birds are very smart. So that's a woodhouse scrub jay, and you can see the range is pretty small in the west. Another bluebird that we have is, it's not a bluebird, but it is a blue colored bird, is the pinyon jay. Now the pinyon jay favors pinyon pines, and our habitat in this country for pinyon pines is really declining. So this is one of the birds that is highly studied. Northern Arizona Audubon, for example, has interns that do periodic pinyon jay surveys to see where these birds are. They're very noisy. They gather in groups during the winter. If you have a seed feeder out, you might get 20 of them at a time, and they'll go through all the seed in your feeder. But it is losing habitat and is a subject for a lot of scientific studies, so we could figure out how to protect them. One of those came, a few of them came over my deck when in my house up north, and I heard this strange noise, and luckily I did have Merlin on, so I got to count the pinyon jay as one of my yard birds up there. So this is the western bluebird. It is colored green and orange because you could see this quite often in northern Arizona. They like meadows, very similar to your eastern bluebird. They like meadows. I see them on golf courses. One of the courses I play in northern Arizona is Pinewood Country Club, and we put up 14 nest boxes. So we are monitoring those nest boxes for nest watch. And when I get back, I think on Monday night, I'll be going through those 14 boxes, seeing what new nesting activity we have. That's a fabulous picture by Eric Goldfried. He gave me a lot of photos to put in my book. I have never met the man. I'll write him paragraphs asking him information, and he answers in about 3 sentences back. But he does fabulous photography, and I really appreciate his contributions. So Thelma and I were on a little trip this morning bird watching, and I said to myself, well, what's the difference between a eastern and a western bluebird? And I really hadn't thought about it much. And then I took a photo here at Waterfall Glen, and you can see this is your eastern bluebird, and it has a very, very white breast. And that is, and also there's a difference in the pattern of where the rust goes. So that was a good learning for me. Besides the fact that if you're west of the Mississippi, it's a western bluebird, and if you're east, it's an eastern bluebird, right? So has anyone ever seen a van-tailed pigeon? Okay, a few of you have. It's an unusual bird in that it's in the west, in the high mountains. It's probably the closest relative to our extinct passenger pigeon. And I remember taking a walk in the neighborhood when we first moved there, and I see these, and I'm thinking are pigeons on somebody's bird feeder, and I'm thinking, what are those rock doves doing there? Well, it's not a rock dove. People come from across the United States to northern Arizona to see this bird. Band-tailed pigeon, beautiful bird with, but very shy. Whenever I go out on my deck, if it even hears me open the door, they all fly away. But it's a bird, again, only in the West and in the high mountains. You will not find this bird in the desert. There's another photo of it. That one was taken off my deck. You can see that shiny iridescent green part on its neck. And then we have the white-winged dove. And as you can see from this slide, there's the orange background. In February, people in Phoenix start hearing the white-winged dove migrating back from Mexico. And we all know that the temperatures are going to start reaching 90 and 100 degrees again, because as come the white-winged doves, so comes spring and so comes the hot temperatures. But it is a bird that thrives on the nectar, pollen, and fruit of the saguaro cactus. There's a picture of a white-winged dove I took in my backyard. I built a nesting platform for a robin that I had for up north, and I never had a robin in it, so I brought it down, and I thought a mourning dove would get in it, and there's a white-winged dove. I don't think it stayed in there, but they are cavity nesters. And here is a photo of our state flower, a saguaro flower, and that's the flower that is very useful to many species in Arizona. It's beautiful. It doesn't last that long. Another bird that is not as common, but you can find in the Phoenix area, is an Inca dove. This dove typically comes up from Mexico. That is its typical range, but it's penetrated into southern Arizona and into the Phoenix area. I've also heard reports that its range is somewhat receding for going further south rather than north. Nobody knows why, at least I don't know why from the studies that I've had, but it's this much smaller little dove. And when I was on the Christmas bird count, we found a little flock of these in a park in Tempe. So you never know where you're going to find some unusual or even common birds. You can go visit a park and bingo, there's a bird. Now, then there's the northern mockingbird. You don't have northern mockingbirds very much in northern Illinois, correct? I think they're further. They're moving in, huh? Do you have some in your yard yet?
No.
No? Okay. But they're a bird in much of the southern United States, but this is a very common yard bird. It has adapted really well to urban environments. And that bird is an absolutely fabulous singer, and you can hear it at midnight singing in the middle with the full moon or not without the full moon, because if it's a male that's unattached, it sings its head off. And you might have insomnia. Well, it'll be worse because you'll hear a northern mockingbird, but it eats completely insects. And it's a common bird. It's very aggressive when it's trying to protect its nest, like probably a lot of other birds. Another bird that easily seen, and this is similar, you have common grackles here. So we have gray-tailed grackles, and they really do have long tails. They are a bird that has adapted really well to the desert area. And why is that? Because we put in golf courses with ponds, and we put in parks with ponds, and people plant grass, and we water the grass. They're typically a bird of marshy areas. Now they're in parking lots, and they're at your restaurant trying to steal your French fries. But it is a very beautiful glossy bird. The male, as you can see, is significantly shinier than the female, but it is now a common bird. I have occasionally seen it in Munns Park, which I live just for the summer about 17 miles south of Flagstaff. And all of us people are going, oh no, are the gray-tailed grackles moving in? And they probably are, you know, we give them that opportunity. We have 5 different thrasher species in Arizona. We have Bendyers. This is a curved bill. We have Crystal, LeConte, and Sage. And the curved bill is the one that has really adapted to suburbia. It's probably in most people's yards. It'll frequent yards with grass. It'll frequent yards in the desert environment. Those others are very seldom seen in Metro Phoenix area. But people, again, come to Arizona to get the 5 species of grackles, but excuse me, thrashers. So this is the curved-bill thrasher, has a beautiful song, probably, but you can see in this next photo, and Thelma was there when I took this photo, very, very curved bill, which is probably a little curvier than the one that for the for the thrasher you have here, the brown thrasher, a little bit. Yeah. And then, do you know what state this bird is the state bird of? What? New Mexico. People think it's Arizona, but it is New Mexico. This is our greater roadrunner. It is a member of the cuckoo family, so it's a run on the ground cuckoo, but they do nest in trees. They like to pick up scorpions and lizards and small and large insects and sometimes other baby birds. Very common in our state, but not so much in suburbia, but I have had one in my backyard 2 or 3 times in the last 12 years we've lived there. If you go to the Desert Botanical Garden or the Phoenix Zoo, you'll see roadrunners, especially around the patio cafe where there's food. But a surprise to me was last year when a friend of mine and I went up to a lake called Ashurst Lake, just about 20 miles west of Flagstaff. Again, high elevation. I'd never seen a roadrunner. And lo and behold, we're watching waterfowl on the lake and we turn around and there is that roadrunner. So like I said, you never know. That's why I think birding is so exciting for all of us. You never know what's going to show up. Maybe one will show up in one of your backyards up here. Probably not, but anyway, it's a beautiful bird. You can see the shiny green on its wings, and right at the top there, there's some red on its neck. Now, our state bird is the cactus wren. That's the largest wren in North America. It is rather friendly. It tends to stay towards in home areas or of course in the desert that are close to the desert. We had a house in North Phoenix that was near a desert preserve, and I loved hearing the cactus wren sound. Then we moved more in town, and I just don't get to see them anymore, which is too bad. Their habitat is also declining. They tend to, they stay here year round. Another wren that we have that you don't have here is a rock wren. Now, the cactus wren has a smaller territory than the rock wren. The rock wren can be found all in the West, has a pretty large territory. And there was even a rare sighting or some rare sightings in DuPage County. The last one was, see if anybody recognizes this, October 2023 at the Cress Creek Farms Park. Last time somebody identified a rock wren. But it's easier if you come to Arizona to see it. Okay. Another yard bird in the desert is Abert's towhee. So this exhibits typical towhee behavior. I usually see 2 of them together at the same time. It's a common yard bird, and they have the typical towhee behavior, scratching at the desert undergrowth and leaves, etc. It's a very dull looking bird. We have some prettier towhees in Arizona. We have the green-tailed towhee. We also have the spotted towhee occasionally, but this is the bird that you would see if you're visiting family or friends anywhere from the west side to the east side. You probably will run into a Abert's towhee. Our most common woodpecker in the desert area is the Gila woodpecker. And the female does not have that little red cap on, but this bird also enjoys the saguaro cacti. It's a bird that is a regular at my house in Scottsdale. You'll also find it in the desert. So that's one that's easily seen. If you see a woodpecker in the Phoenix area, it's most likely the Gila woodpecker. And then we have the gilded flicker, which for a while was sort of hard for me to even figure out, but it was a split from the northern flicker back in 1985. So the Gila woodpecker is a species specific to the Sonoran Desert. It's a little smaller than the northern flicker, and it has a rustier crown. So when you're visiting us and you see a flicker and you're in the desert, it's highly likely that it would be a gilded flicker. Now, this is my favorite woodpecker. Some people call it clown face. And this is a photo I took out of our window on the deck. It's an acorn woodpecker. And this happens to be a female. This is something I also learned. See that little black band between the red cap and the white? That differentiates it from the male. These are communal woodpeckers, meaning they live in family groups. They're very vocal. They have jobs like I think that female is the sentry. It's the sentry on my deck to let all the other acorn woodpeckers know when we put out sunflower seeds, for example. And I don't put out peanuts anymore because I used to put out peanuts, and then the poor band-tailed pigeons would get bombarded by the acorn woodpeckers, and I don't want to create any more distress in this world than there is already. So I don't put out peanuts anymore. But the one with the circle there on the bottom, that is the male. So you can see that one doesn't have that black band. So they're very communal. They nest in trees. They have a granary, so they put in hundreds of acorns in dead trees, and they store them for the winter. And that's what they're known for. They'll store them in little holes on the side of your house. But I want to tell you a little story about the Phoenix area, because when I first moved to Phoenix, I heard that you could find acorn woodpeckers in Mount Ord, which is the northeast corner of Maricopa County that is high up and has ponderosa pines, or you could find a little group on the campus of Arizona State University. And I'm busy in my career, et cetera, and I wasn't going to go traipsing around that big university to try to find acorn woodpeckers, so I never did. So then up in the Flagstaff area, I got acorn woodpeckers, dime a dozen, and I know their calls and everything. So I'm golfing at the club that we golf at, 56th Street in Thomas, in the middle of town in Phoenix. And I'm on the 9th hole, I'm making a putt, and I hear an acorn woodpecker. I'm like, what the heck? And I miss my putt. That's probably not because of the acorn woodpecker, just because I'm not a great golfer. But there's acorn woodpeckers at Arizona Country Club. Now, how did that happen? And my friend says to me, well, didn't you ever notice there's Texas live oak trees all lining up the parking lot? So those acorn woodpeckers are very adaptable, and they have expanded their territory into central Phoenix. And this is a map I got off of eBird and Birds of the World that shows you acorn woodpecker sightings. This happened to be, I was talking to the Desert Rivers Audubon, and this is, which is on the east side of Phoenix. So there are acorn woodpeckers all over. I found one on the Christmas bird count. And the 4th year I did this, here's an acorn woodpecker flying into a palm tree where it now caches its acorns. And you can see that little acorn in its beak. I was at the state capitol in February on a Saturday. I wasn't bird watching. I might have been marching, but I can't tell you for sure. But there's an acorn woodpecker at the state capitol. So I put it in eBird so that we know. So they really are expanding their territory. Here's a beautiful woodpecker, quite rare actually. It is on the list of species of special concern since 1982. We don't really know all the reasons for the loss of habitat. It's a Lewis's woodpecker from Lewis and Clark Expeditions. That name will change as well. But it's unusual in Arizona or across North America because of the coloring. It has that salmon pink. It also sits on branches and it fly catches like a flycatcher. So it's not your typical woodpecker behavior. If you want to see that, you can go to the White Mountains in Pinetop Lakeside, and there's a city park with a big lake, Pinetop Lake, Woodland Hills, Woodland Lake, and there's a little common group of these birds up there. First one I saw was in the dead of winter going to a meeting at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. So they are also somewhat migratory, so they don't always stay in the same place like other woodpeckers. Okay. This is supposed to go. When all else fails. Page down. What did you do, Matt?
Something. It's always my fault.
Let's see if I could get, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I knew he caused the problem and then he fixed it. Yay for you, Matt.
It's fun to do that.
All right, this is our version of the rose-breasted grosbeak. We have a black-headed grosbeak. Again, it's a bird that's one of the early migrants. They're already nesting. Typically, the males show up before the females. Beautiful song. It's a bird of, again, Northern Arizona. Let's see if this will work. And then the painted redstart, which is the other side of the American redstart, right? We were walking around today and we heard American redstarts, but I'll be darned if I saw one. They're way up there. But I was really hoping to see this bird. And one of my neighbors in Flagstaff said, "Oh, I saw a painted redstart last week." I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous. So I'm sitting on my deck working on my computer, and I see this black and white and red thing just hopping all over because they're very, very busy birds, as you know. And there was a painted redstart. Again, it's not that common, but they are to be seen, especially if you go on any kind of birding trips in Northern Arizona. And then the red-faced warbler, which is a bird that people come from across the country to see. It has a very limited territory, as you can see, in the high country parts of Arizona and New Mexico. And that story, a neighbor of mine said, and our house is, the back deck sort of faces down below a canyon. So sometimes there's water that runs through there, and then there's houses behind that, but it's sort of secluded. And she said to me, "Guess what, Margaret? I saw a red-faced warbler at my bird bath." I'm like, dang, I'm so jealous. I'll buy you breakfast if you could find me one. So I was sitting, this is a few years ago, my mom was alive, and I was sitting on the front steps talking to her on the phone, and we had the sprinkler system in our yard from the previous owners, and it was a really dry June, and I turned the sprinkler system on because normally I just don't have a fancy yard. They had planted plants that had died, but I thought, well, I'm going to get the ground wet, and so there's water popping up everywhere because there were holes in the sprinkler system, and lo and behold, a red-faced warbler comes by because it's attracted to water. So I have a dripping bird bath, and that's where I get a lot of birds. Let me show you. This is my photo from my best photo, even though it was taken through a window and rather unclear, is a red crossbill, which was my yard bird last year, first yard bird, and a red-faced warbler at the same time taking a little bath. And I know red crossbills are found throughout the United States, and probably many of you see them here. But just in case you hadn't, I wanted to show a photo. This is not a common bird here. And you'll never find them in the desert, but you can find them in Northern Arizona, but they're not unique. But what is unique is a pygmy nuthatch. They are also communal. They're very small. They travel in little colonies and groups. Sometimes during the winter, they can pack 20 or 30 of them in a whole cavity to stay warm. They're very friendly. If I could walk out on the deck and the bandtail pigeons fly off and the little pygmy nuthatches show up and go, what do you have for me today? You know, so another bird that is easily seen is the mountain chickadee. That chickadee, unlike the black-capped chickadee, has a white stripe over its eye. And as you can see from the range map, it's pretty much a Western species. Also, we don't have an American goldfinch, but we have a lesser goldfinch. And this is a shot to show you how yellow they are from the underside. They're very good singers. They're found in both northern and southern Arizona. I have them regularly in my yard in the winter in Phoenix, and from the little research I did, because I'm not in Phoenix anymore for the summers, they are year-round in the desert area. So this is another photo of them. That's what they typically look like. So you can see they're quite different from an American goldfinch. They either have a black or a black-green back. They also are a good mimic on other birds' songs. Another desert bird that is unique is a tiny little verdin. I took this one, it was in a fairy duster plant, and I just happened to get a good shot. It is basically gray. It's how do you say that? Insectivorous. It eats insects. And it has this tiny little red patch on its shoulder, but you can often hear them. They have a pretty unique sound, and Merlin would identify them very quickly. So here's a pop quiz. We're more than halfway through the presentation. What warbler commonly found east of the Mississippi is a cavity nester and will use a nest box? Yes, a prothonotary, which we don't have and which we were looking today. I don't have that bird. We were looking for that, but it uses a nest box. There you go. Right answer. All of you who got the right answer will get your parking sticker validated. Okay, now next question. What warbler found west of the Mississippi is a cavity nester and will use a specially made nest box? Yes, I heard that. Who said that? It's a Lucy's warbler. There we go. And that name will change. We're hoping it will change to something like the desert warbler or the mesquite warbler. It's a small, very busy brown bird. I hear them sometimes when I'm golfing at certain golf courses that are located closer to the desert. But at my house in Scottsdale, across from my yard, across the street, we have one of the canals go by. It's a hohokam. It was originally from the hohokam, and of course it's been taken over by the Salt River Project and actually moves water through the whole valley. And we have a lot of mesquite trees. So I convinced my HOA to put up some Lucy warbler boxes. And there is my backyard with me building a Lucy warbler box. It was pioneered by Tucson Audubon Society, which is now the Tucson Bird Alliance, and they realized how much that species was declining, so they came up with a nest box in which those birds will nest. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Very common bird is the Gambel's quail. They'll lay 14, 20 eggs. Unfortunately, they have a high mortality rate. But they're a common bird. I have them, of course, in my yard in Scottsdale, but you'll see them in the desert. You'll see them in parks. Part of it is they're running around in people's yards and the babies will fall in the swimming pools, which is really sad to see. And they also get picked off by roadrunners and other things, but it's a bird that everybody loves. It's visible. It'll make a nest in your house planters, for example, so you have to be careful. There's the female. Then we have a Say's phoebe. That's again a bird, a phoebe of the West. It can be found in gardens, in yards, in parks, on golf courses, in school grounds. It's a little different than the black phoebe, which typically likes to be near water. So if I'll bring my golfing analogy, or when I'm bird watching, you'll see a black phoebe perched on a little stick, you know, hawking for insects. And later down, when you walk down a path and away from the water, you'll more likely see a Say's phoebe. So that's a very sharp looking black and white bird that is pretty prevalent, but you won't see it in DuPage County. And this is the star of our golf course, because this bird, I did not see this bird. In fact, I forgot to look up when it first appeared. We're golfing and there's a vermilion flycatcher. I'm like, holy cow, this is so special. And now there's 3 or 4 nesting vermilion flycatchers at 56th Street and Thomas in Phoenix, and they're on the canal, and they're on our Christmas bird count, and they have just really expanded their territory. So suddenly everybody at Arizona Country Club has now become a birder because they see this bird and they go, did you see that cardinal? Like, no, it's not a cardinal, but you're close. That's a good guess. It's a vermilion flycatcher. It's a bird that many people come to Arizona to see. This is a photo that I took in a cemetery on the Christmas bird count, and it's actually sitting on fake flowers, but another nice photo of a vermilion flycatcher. One swallow that you do not have, and I have to commend Eric Goldfried for this fabulous photo, because you know how hard it is to get photos of swallows. I've been trying to take photos of cliff swallows at my house, and they're going like this all the time. You know, they just hardly ever sit still. But this is a violet green swallow. It will nest in nest boxes. It's absolutely beautiful, but when it's flying, you can tell by the white patch on its back. Just a beautiful bird. And then we have some hawk specialties. This is a Harris hawk. You can see it's very specialized, pretty much in the southern part of the United States. It is a communal hunter. I mean, it hunts in families. It's a very dark bird. You can be driving down Camelback Road and a couple Harris hawks will fly over. So they're very common in the valley. They have this white patch on their back. So if you see a dark hawk with a white patch, it's most likely a Harris hawk. And here's a couple of them. You can see how dark they really are. And 2 of them. And today a friend of mine sent me a photo. It was her neighbor on next door took a photo of 3 Harris hawks in a residential area building a big nest. And I couldn't quite get it clear enough to use it for this presentation, but they typically hunt in 3-4 groups, 3 or 4 to a group, and they, you know, chase that rabbit from different angles and get it. They're also a bird that is used a lot by people who train hawks and use them because they're so social, they're pretty easy to train. Up north, we have a zone-tailed hawk. And again, you can see its range is pretty limited. It is thought that it evolved to look like a turkey vulture because you can see how its wings have the coloration of a turkey vulture, and it like, well, maybe I can fly around and people think those things on the ground will think I'm a vulture and they're safe, and then instead it's really a hawk, but it has that banding on its back, on its tail. Here's a couple birds that you probably will not easily see. Is everybody hearing this okay? Is it okay? Yeah. You probably won't easily see, but if you go to the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, or you might be at the Desert Botanical Garden, this is a Pyroluxia, and sometimes it's called the desert cardinal. It's not a common yard bird. It prefers that desert, and cardinals and Pyrohuxleas, their ranges do overlap, but cardinals prefer a little wetter environment. And then we have the Phainopepla. Again, not a common yard bird, but if you're visiting friends who live in Sun City or places out north towards the desert, or places in the east part where it's not yet too ripped up with grass and things, and it's more on the edge of the desert, you'll see a Phainopepla. They also can be seen on the Salt River. There's certain stops, which is only a half-an-hour drive from the Phoenix area. They are really dependent on mistletoe berries. So the mistletoe will grow around mesquite, and they can eat 1,000, it's estimated they can eat 1,000 mistletoes in one day. So another pop quiz, are you ready? Okay. Please spell the names of the last two birds that I showed you. Joking, because I don't think I could do Pyrohuxley easily. But anyway, they're at least they're named after themselves and not a person. Okay, now we're wrapping up here. We have Anna's hummingbird is the most common hummingbird in the valley. It also is found in northern Arizona. I don't see them as often, but that's a male. This is a female. Looks like typical female hummingbird, right? You know, you have a much duller. And these are the babies. And that, out of 12 years living in this house, last year was the first year I actually found a hummingbird nest because it was right out the kitchen window. You think my husband would have found it first because he does all the dishes. But no, I had to find it. But anyway, they ended up fledging two little hummingbirds. Another common bird in the desert is the black-chinned. And that's a pretty good photo because you can see how black it is, but in the sun, it'll get very iridescent. But it can be found in a variety of habitats, including urban areas. Then we have one more for the for southern Arizona. Again, I'm only talking about the Phoenix area, because if you go down to southern Arizona, they have as many, I think, as 16 different species down there. So you'll have to ask me back for another talk. But this is the Costa hummingbird. It has a smaller range than the black-chinned hummingbird, and it prefers habitats with Joshua trees and cholla cactus. So we don't see those too often, but you certainly can see them in the desert. Now, up north, we have the broad-tailed hummingbird, and the best way to find those is you hear them. They fly by and you hear their wings. So that's the bird that I have at my hummingbird feeder up north. And then there's the rufous hummingbird. How many of you have seen a rufous? Okay, a few of you. Small, but especially you, right, Dennis? Small but mighty. That bird is tiny. It starts coming down from British Columbia and the Northwest in about July. We'll start seeing these birds come down in about July, and they'll come through the Flagstaff area and rest for about a week and recover before they fly. So as you can see from that line I have on the right-hand side, that is their coming back south route. So that's when we see them go, and we'll see them in Phoenix as well if they stop. But when they go migrate north, they hug the western coast. So that's why we never see them in the spring typically. So they have an unusual migratory pattern. And last but not least is a burrowing owl. And I know that there's some in Texas, there's some in Florida. Their habitat is declining. We have a burrowing owl rescue group. They're often relocated when developers go in and find burrowing owl habitats. They're communal, they live together, but a surefire place to find them. And it's during the day because they are diurnal rather than nocturnal. Is you go to Scottsdale Community College, and at the very back of that college, there's a special protected area for burrowing owls. And usually I'm birding and I'm done and it's high noon and you think, oh, I better go home because all the birds are gone. We stop at the Scottsdale Community College and there's the burrowing owl. So just to wrap this up, if you're in the valley, there's many places to go birding. I've listed the sort of the hot spots here. The Gilbert Water Ranch is a important birding area. We just put up a Modus station up there in cooperation with the town of Gilbert. So you can, it's a station that will get a ping from any bird that has a transmitter on it. Now there are stations across the United States. So you fit a bird or a butterfly or an animal with these little transmitters. And when they fly past, it pings that and it becomes into a database. And scientists from across the world can use MODIS data to do scientific research on. It's an open database. The Desert Botanical Garden and Phoenix Zoo are great places to bird. The Desert Botanical Garden has bird walks at 7 a.m. on Monday mornings. A park that I go to is the Evelyn Hallman Park in Tempe. There's other parks that I'm sure you could find birds at. The Salt River is about a half-an-hour drive. There's about 5 or 6 different stops you can take to see different species. And then further east is the Boyce Thompson Arboretum in the town of Superior. Pretty much you can see phainopeplas at those last 2 places. And then if you're up north, Kachina Wetlands is right about 10 miles, maybe even less, south of the Flagstaff city limits. It's a wonderful place for birding. It's another IBA, important bird area. We have 3 kestrel boxes up there, and last year we released a couple kestrels, and we'll be getting on our ladders again at the end of the summer and seeing if kestrels actually nested in any of them. The Museum Northern Arizona, the Arboretum, City of Flagstaff are good places for birding. Picture Canyon, I got a couple pictures of those. You can go to about any park in Flagstaff and see some of the birds that I mentioned. And that Ashhurst Lake is the one I mentioned. It's in the Coconino National Forest, and that's where we saw the roadrunner, but I would not promise that you'll see that again. So here's some photos. This is what Kachina Wetlands looks like. There's about 7 different ponds. Sometimes they're dry, sometimes they're halfway filled because it's a recirculating water cleansing facility, but it's a great place to bird. Here's the photo of the Arboretum. Here's a photo of Picture Canyon at Rio de Flag. It's the only river that actually goes through Flagstaff, and that picture on the far right, you can see down the gorge, there's a little bit of the river. So all good places. I know Lewis woodpeckers are found there pretty regularly. So as for Arizona, some of the resources I could offer to you, we have 8 Audubon chapters throughout the state. They all focus on education and conservation, and they do field trips. We have 5 birding festivals, and Thelma is wearing a shirt from the Verde Valley Birding Festival, so she's walking advertisement. But Wings Over Wilcox coincides with all the sandhill cranes. We'll get 30,000 sandhill cranes down there for the months of December, January, and February. Southwest Wing Spring Fling is in Sierra Vista, so now we're talking south of Phoenix. You'd see a whole bunch of also new different types of birds. The Southeast Birding Festival that's run by the Tucson group is done in August. I've never gone to that, but I hear it's like fabulous. And then there's the Sedona Hummingbird Festival, which takes place in August. So, and finally, we did set up through a couple, I think we got a grant from Tucson Audubon, and then we partnered with the tourist, Arizona Tourist, and have an Arizona birding trail. And you can go to that website, www.arizonabirdingtrail.com. So hopefully there's a lot of resources when you visit us. And I think I have one more, and that's it. So thank you very much. And thank you. So are there any questions that I could try to answer? Or any stories you'd like to share about Arizona, or anything in the chat? We have one in the back.
I'm curious about I think it's called the red-faced lovebird.
Oh, question about the rosy-faced lovebird. You know, I thought about putting that up here because it's not native, so I didn't. It's a rosy-faced lovebird. I believe it came from India or Southeast Asia. I'd have to, somebody can Google that and tell me, but there are beautiful little parrots, and they're rosy-faced lovebirds. They nest in cavities. And they have really taken off in Phoenix, Arizona. So you'll see this green bird come to your bird feeder with a peach colored head. And so far that we know, they haven't been detrimental to native birds, but they are cavity nesters. So you wonder, I'd rather have them than house sparrows.
Question though is where Are they difficult to find if you're a tourist and you don't have a backyard? And are there places in the city you can go see them?
Yes, you can, the question was, can you see rosy-faced lovebirds in the city? Yes, you can. They can be found in garden shops like nurseries. You can go on eBird to see where they were found. I had some fly over my yard a couple days ago, so I have seen them on golf courses. But I don't know a place off the top of my head for sure, but I know that eBird could give you some information. Any other questions or anything in the chat? Okay, so that's Kim. I ran into her on a field trip at the Evelyn Hallman Park, and I said, oh, I'm going up to Chicago, and she said she's from Chicago, and she said she knew Thelma, and then all of a sudden we were really good friends. So thank you. So you can see them in Fountain Hills and at the Desert Botanical Gardens. Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Any other questions? Anything from the chat?
We don't have anything on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.